Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you first to the Saginaw Art Museum and also to the community here. And I didn't see you sitting there first when I got here, so come on, Watkins. Flint in the house. And so I am very thankful. I walk in moments of grace, gratitude, moments of grief, and also moments of joy. And so this work called She Carries is a culmination of a new series that I started based on a journey that I had to Zimbabwe. Now, if you don't know me as an artist or an artivist or just a being from Detroit, I was born during the rebellion. So I am a riot baby. I was born in 1967 in Detroit, and it was hot there. I was born in August, but it was right after the rebellion in July. So my mother was pregnant with me when the things were happening on 14th Street, and she was very engaged in them. So when I say I'm an artivist or my work is born from the moment of the rebellions in Detroit, which, you know, if you don't know the history, it's a history of one of the blackest cities in the country, and people who felt that that was powerful at the time. And we said what we wanted, and they did what they knew they needed to do in order to get the rights that they or we now benefit from. So growing up in Detroit, being a blue-collar city, and my father worked at Ford, my grandmother worked at Chrysler, all of my neighbors worked at the plant. You know, you never heard the term artist in my neighborhood, or at least I didn't. But I grew up in a neighborhood where my whole family lived on the block, and we had a neighborhood. People's doors were unlocked. If you got in trouble by Mr. Thomas, you get in trouble by Miss Thomas, and they tell Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, and by the time you got home, you got in trouble 4 or 5 times. And then your grandmother got you on top of all of that before your mom got home, who also got you. And so it was like you had all these parent adjacents. And so everybody in the neighborhood knew your mother when she went to high school. They either did her hair, you know, or for the prom, or, you know, the barber was still at the corner, and the corner store was somebody that you knew, and everybody knew each other. The businesses were at the corner of the block, so everybody knew you before you even got here. And so it was an interesting, beautiful time. You had family, you had extended family, and most of the families in the 70s, they all took up blocks. So you knew your grandmother was here, your aunt was here, your cousin, and everybody was on the block. And then families from certain southern areas were all in the same area. So my community was Detroit and Alabama. Other communities was like Detroit and Tennessee, or Detroit and, you know, so depending on my community, mostly everybody was from Alabama. And so it was like in the summer times, you knew most of the families would go down, they'd caravan, drive down and come back. And so watching people in the neighborhood was really interesting. I would sit on the porch with my great-grandmother, and we would watch people go by, and you would listen to them speak to each other. And if they didn't speak, she would say, "Did I wake up with you this morning?" And, you know, and you knew what that meant. You'd be like, "Okay, hey, how you doing?" And so it was very southern, but also very city-like. And all the kids freely played until the street lights came on. When the street lights came on, you knew you had to be on home base. You had to be on the porch, you had to be in the house. But we played outside all the time. And because I remember growing up in a neighborhood where I had a lot of mothers and a lot of aunties or grandmother adjacent, They were also makers. So that was a real word for me, a maker. So coming in the house was clean. When certain programs were on, you had to be quiet. You know, when it was time to eat, we ate together. And so the house was a huge installation for me. Like the dining room table was set up a certain way, the china cabinet. Everybody's house at that time had a picture of the Kennedys and Dr. Martin Luther King. Like you had to. And then they had the Jesus lamps. You gotta have like the supper with the disciples and the lamps coming out of it. I mean, it was like that was normal. Everybody's house had that. So it was interesting to remember my childhood and homes. Like you would go in the homes and everybody had china cabinets. They would have like curio cabinets with things that they had from their travels. And in the curio cabinets, it would be spoons from travel or shot glasses or little figurines. And that became an installation in the living room. And then in the bedrooms, my great-grandmother had her own room with a chifforobe and a cedar chest. In the cedar chest were very sacred things from Alabama. It was like the family Bible with the first lock of hair that she may have cut of her first or oldest son. And so she would keep things in this, and I, as a child, wasn't allowed to go in there, but every now and then when she would go to church or go somewhere, we would open the chest. And I opened it mostly because it smelled great. I remember mothballs, you know, to keep the little animals from eating the things, but it was like family quilts. It was like baby clothes. It was things that they had carried from Alabama all the way to Detroit. They were memories, they were sacred things, they were birth certificates. It was like important things. And I remember a lot of biblical quotes, and she had these little, they were like almost index cards, but they were printed. I don't know where they came from, but I remember the first thing that I learned how to read was one of those cards in the hallway on a linen closet wooden cabinet that we could just open like this in the middle of the hallway. And what it said, and I have that card in my hallway now, and it said, "Today is the first day of the rest of your life." That was the first thing that I learned how to read. And so I remember seeing it at 2 and 3 and then 4 and then 5, and I could put the letters together, and I remember my great-grandmother teaching me how to read it. She also had a dresser full of doilies. They were everywhere. I don't know if she made them or if they came from Alabama, but there was lace tablecloths and doilies, and she was an usher. She was also a Eastern Star member, and my grandmother was a current Eastern Star member. My great-grandmother didn't go to the meetings or the gatherings anymore. She was just an elderly woman that people from church would come and give her communion, and they would pray for her, and at night I had to read the Bible for her because she couldn't see it. So I just remember all the installations on her dresser and things that I wasn't allowed to touch until she left. And I mean like her brush and her comb on the mirror, her doilies, the Bible, the crystal glass container with powder. It was a powder puff. And she loved rose, so everything was rose. The smell of the powder was rose, the lotion, the perfume that was like a pump perfume crystal bottle that matched the crystal case. And I remember asking her where she got these things from, and she would say, "Oh, those were given to me as gifts for the woman I used to clean for." So a lot of the really beautiful, expensive things that she had on her dresser that I wasn't allowed to touch were gifts that she got for the woman that she used to clean for and the children she raised that were this woman's children, right? And so this was my great-grandmother. And I don't know if she did that only in Alabama or if she did it in Michigan, because by the time I was born, she was over 70. And so she was just an elderly woman to me who spent a lot of time smelling like rose and making sure that her garden was beautiful in the back of the house. And my job was to do her hair and read for her because she couldn't see. And I slept with her a lot. So I spent time in the cedar closet. I spent time tinkering with things that were her installation, if you would. And her room was immaculate. Ours was not. And so I liked her room because it had order and it was very controlled, but it also felt like her. My job was to help her put on her undergarments. And because she was an elderly woman, she had a bra that was like long as my body. And I had to help put all the hook and eyes together. And I just remember spending so much time putting them together as a little girl. She would sit on the bed and I would stand on top of the mattress and just start putting it together. But she wore all kinds of undergarments. And I'm talking like, I know the bra was long, but it must have been like a girdle and some other things. It was just too many things. But I just remember me being her helper. And so in thinking about the house that I grew up in and this work that you see here, I had already been influenced by, I would say, like the Holy Trinity in my house. That would be my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my mother. So I grew up in a house full of women, and my great-grandmother was a widower. My grandmother was divorced, and so was my mother. And so, but all the men in the family would come over because my great-grandmother was the last of 15 children. So she had a lot of nieces and nephews that were her age, you know, and most of her siblings had died. So she was sort of like the elder in the family. So there was always company coming. Either they were coming from the church or they were coming from the family. So this woman here is my grandmother. And so she would make all of her clothes and she would dress like, and so when people say you get that dressing from, I'm like, I know where I get it from because she made everything and I would get the scraps and make my dolls with them and I learned how to just hand sew. So my first introduction to making was sewing. And so I would make these doll clothes, but her name was Thelma Marie, and this is her cousin, Carrie Love. And her name was probably Care Love, but Carrie Love and Thelma Marie. And they were best friends and cousins, but they dressed so well and they made everything for the house, everything for us, everything for their children and their grandchildren. And so I just watched her a lot and thinking of the things that she carried. She was the baby girl in the family. Her mother had 8 children. They had 3 girls and 5 boys. And so because she was the baby girl, the mother lived with her. Everybody else, you know, had their own families and lived in Cleveland or Alabama or wherever they chose. Everybody was somewhere, and then we landed in Detroit because my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather came here first for the automotive industry. And I heard my great-grandfather was security, and it was a plant on Jefferson. So I don't know what was there, but he was working there. And then some of his children joined here. So this particular piece is from a series called I Had a Praying Grandmother. And so thinking about how her prayers are still covering me and blessing me to this day, and also allowing me to see all of the things that she made possible for us to not have to worry about, you know. And so understanding the language of style, the language of how to set up your house and how to be independent and how not to have to worry about what society says a woman should do and a woman should have in order to have a household. So I watched her run her household as a divorcee, which is like, oh, how could you do that? And then my mother, who also was divorced, was in the house with these 3 women, and then these 2 girls, and then my baby brother was born. And so it was interesting living in the house and listening to the language before the brothers and uncles came over or the fathers came over. It was really a woman's house, and they carried everything. We had a garden. We understood how to heal each other, to take care of each other from the garden, from the kitchen first. This one here is one of my girlfriend's grandmother. Her name is Natasha Diogan. Her family's from India. And so when I did this series, I not only covered my blood family, but I was thinking about women who were the grandmothers of my great best friends. So women who are your maternal grandmother are born with you inside them. So I was thinking of Natasha and how much of a good friend she is, and knowing that her grandmother was into fashion and wore pants and was also an artist. And so I thanked all the grandmothers of the friends that I have by drawing their grandmothers. And so this is her maternal grandmother, her Nani. And then this is one of my best cousin's sister friend's grandmother, who is my grandmother's oldest sister. And we called her Aunt Billy. Her name was Blanche, but because she was the oldest, my great-grandfather wanted a son to be the first child. So we named her Blanche, and they called her Billy. And so she had the responsibility of being the second-tier mother to the 7 children underneath her. And all of the white ones, the white papers, are grandmother series, with the exception of Jessica here. And so I think about the seeds that they carried in them that were the women that I love deeply. And so I have Helen Moore's mother in the back, and if you know Helen Moore, she's fought for public education in Detroit for a very long time. And so that's her mother, Mrs. Rice. And then this is my grandmother's grandmother, who was born on a plantation. That's Mother Mary in the back on the right. And then my grandmother's next sister on the white paper here, that's she was one of the only children who remained in Alabama. And so that's my Aunt Mary Sue. And so wanting to think about the seeds that they carried, the women that they birthed, and what they carried from other lands or other towns, and how they moved about with what they carried. This piece is a result from a series that I did called Who is Medicine? And what does that mean? Not necessarily something you might get from pharmaceutical, but what does it mean to be a healer or an activist in your community? And who are those folks? And what does it represent? So I consider myself a healer. I consider myself giving myself permission to heal the community, to be the change that I want to see, and also to help plant seeds in young artists that I meet. And so this particular portrait is of my friend. It doesn't look like Jessica as much as I feel like it feels like her. Jessica Care Moore is the Detroit Poet Laureate. She won the Apollo, I think, 10 times in a row. So she's an Apollo legend with her poetry, and they had to invite her to leave because they didn't know what else to do with her. You know, between Steve Harvey and Kiki Shepard coming out going, oh, she gonna win one more time? So they were like, okay, you gotta go. So she became an Apollo legend, but they had to invite her to leave because they just didn't know what to do with someone who was winning from poetry. And so she still lives on her poems. In this particular case, I wanted to talk about the fact that poems and power are the medicine that we need, especially in this time, in the words of James Baldwin, where it's the fire this time. Listening to the address and listening to folks I think his name is Al Green. I think he got put out of the chambers last night. So there's a lot of things that are happening across the aisles that are not going well. And as a community in this country, the best way to work is together, and it's just not looking good. And we got cousins over in Canada. So, you know, Detroit and the bridge and the tunnel, we're like so close, and it's just like most people in Detroit may have an enhanced license. So it's easy to go to Windsor. It's easy to take the bridge and go to Toronto. And even flights, you know, are sometimes easier to take from Canada. You know, I used to drive through Canada to get to New York just as a slight shortcut through Buffalo, and it's just not good right now. So I'm just thinking about the medicine that we need to be in order to move in a way. Toni Morrison says these are the times we need to do art, when it is discourse in the world and things are on fire and we don't have the control to change it, but we do have the power to be the light that we need to be in this moment. So Jessica is the poem in this light, the power of poetry. And sometimes you don't realize you need poetry until you don't have it, until you're at a funeral or another life moment and you're like, what do we need? You know, poems can be like flowers or, you know, a great summer day or sunshine. And art, music, writing, literature, and dance, it's all the same type of medicine. And you don't realize you need it until you don't have it. So that's what this represents. And so she carries the poems, she carries the power, and we need that. This is my younger sister, Corinne, and she is St. John's wort. If you understand herbs and what they do, if you're not feeling well, and that means emotionally, sometimes if you're healing yourself from a garden or a kitchen, you might want to get some catnip and drink it, or douse, you know, your carpets with lavender and vacuum the floor, or your pillows. St. John wort is an herb that actually calms you down when you're depressed or sad. And I feel like when I did all of the portraits of my siblings for a show that I had at Central Michigan, I thought about all of the herbs that my siblings represented, how they're healing to me. And I haven't lost a sibling yet. And so I'm lucky in that way. And I have, how many sisters? 5 sisters, 2 brothers. And so I'm blessed to have them. But this one right here, she's sort of like the softer mediator in between us. She's like, she listens very well. She asks questions and she wants to spend time with us all individually. And I don't know that people still do that. You know, when she comes to town, she lives in Florida, she actually makes appointments with every single sibling and her nieces and nephews, and she has dates on the calendar, and we have to spend time with her because she wants to know what's going on with you. What about this? And she asks really great questions, but I feel like she is the herb in the family because she's not my youngest sibling, but she's the one who keeps everybody's secrets. She's the one who does a well check with everybody. How are you, sister? How are you, brother? How's it going? Have you had your checkup? Anybody check on mom? We have sibling text Sunday. So everybody has to text on Sunday. We don't care who starts it, but we all have to find out, how are you doing? How are your children doing? What's happening in your life? And so Sunday, the phone is blowing up. But I don't want it to start before 8:30, because if it starts before 8:30, I'm mad. And if it goes after 11:30, we have another sibling that's chopping heads. So it has to start by a certain time and it has to finish. And if it has a continuation, we can go on to Monday. So this is Corinne, and she's one of my herbs. And so she is St. John's wort. Let's get into the news series, but first let me tell you about my trip to Zimbabwe. So I applied for an artist residency several years ago to go to Zimbabwe, to a place called Harare, which is City of Rocks, and it is, I think, the capital of Zimbabwe. I do remember a whole bunch of student groups from CCS, the College for Creative Studies. I've been there 30 years, going to Zimbabwe because one of our professors grew up there. And so he would provide a study abroad opportunity for our students to go. And so there was always a partnership with a group called SATSA Detroit in Hamtramck to send an artist from Zimbabwe here and then an artist from Detroit there. I'd done so many different programs and collaborations with the artist in Zimbabwe only over the phone. And so I wanted to go, but we could never figure out how I could go with my work schedule. And then finally, Cheeto says, "You want to go?" I was like, yeah. And so I finally got the green light to apply, and when they accepted me, I'd already known most of the folks that I'd been on WhatsApp and Zoom with and programming. We'd only seen each other online. So I had no expectations. I just thought, I'm going to the continent of Africa. I know Zimbabwe is just above or underneath South Africa. So I know it's going to be different than here. And when I was going, it was going to be their winter, which is not winter for us. It's like, at night it can get down to like 55. And during the day, 70 maybe. That's still winter. Like they got on scullies, coats, gloves, scarves. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, this ain't winter, but okay. I don't want to see summer if this is winter. So I got the green light to go, and I had no expectations. I actually will invite you all to go on YouTube and look up the Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers. I'm actually telling the story of Zimbabwe and how I lost my suitcase. And it's called Trippin'. And so I'll give you the quick story. So I pack 2 bags. I pack art supplies. I'm going to teach a workshop to these artists in etching and drawing and printmaking. And I get 3 days to figure out, it's 6 hours time difference in Zimbabwe. So they're 6 hours ahead of Detroit. So the flight from Detroit to New York, easy. The flight from New York to Kenya, not easy. It was about 14.6 hours from New York to Kenya. It was still very beautiful. I'm sitting in the airport, and I've never been on an all-black crew flight, so I'm bugging, I'm excited. I see these women come up with these, they have on like your sweater is like almost a deep burgundy, but mix that with a little bit of red, or the suitcases that are on the floor. It's like this deep burgundy. They have on these, the flight attendants have on these uniforms, and then they have this bead that goes across their forehead that's like seed beads, but it's almost like, you could tell it was like an African beaded like necklace or hairpiece, but it goes across the forehead. It just lays across the forehead like this. And everybody's coif is so freaking like, I'm like, what is this, Afro Sheen commercial? I mean, it was just so freaking beautiful. Everybody's face was snatched and just so like made up and just makeup beautiful, and the hair was tight, and I was like, it was like Doechii times 3,000. And so if you don't know Doechii, you need to know who Doechii is, because Doechii is amazing. Anyways, so they all walk. I'm sitting at the airport, I'm waiting to get on the Kenya Airways, and these women walk past me, and they got on heels and these suits, and it's Kenya Airs, and I'm like, and I'm looking at them, I'm like, y'all gonna be that fine? But I didn't realize it came out of my mouth. I was like, damn, y'all gonna be that fine? Y'all gonna look like that? Damn. And so I'm like just looking, I'm like, oh my God, y'all so beautiful, my eyes are bleeding. And so they started laughing and they walk past me and they get on, the flight to get ready for us. And then the captains come and I'm like, ooh, we go together. Because they're like these black, beautiful captains. And I'm like, what is happening? I love all three of y'all. I mean, like, we go together because y'all so fine and I'm just over here by myself. We go together. And I'm just like, wow, this is the crew? And then I get on the plane and I'm so happy, and it's a pretty nice size plane, where they have like the 3 rows. There's one in the middle and then 2 seats on that side, and then there's aisles this way. So I'm like right in the middle. And I check one bag, which I borrowed my mother's bag. And if you know Peggy Bundy, the bag is very Peggy Bundy. It's like a zebra striped cat something. I just was like, I'm gonna get the ugliest bag so won't nobody take it. And it's just big enough to put all my stuff in and some art supplies, and I'll take the other one on the plane with me. And so I get to Kenya. The food, by the way, is really good. They give you vegan options, and it was like some samosas and rice with onion. It was like spiced. I'm like, somebody know how to use seasoning. This is not Delta. I mean, it was so good. So when I get to Kenya, we have to wait like, I think 6 or 7 hours or something. Or no, the flight is about 4 or 5 hours. But from Kenya to Zimbabwe, I'm waiting. I get to Zimbabwe. I get a text from the person who's picking me up. And he's like, I'm outside. And I'm like, I'm waiting on my bag. It doesn't come. And I'm like, the bag is gone. Dagnabbit. So I go outside, and the first thing I hear is, what up, doe? And I'm like, wait a minute. And you can't see anything. It's like dark, not like our airports. It's like when it's dark, it's dark. And so I realized one of my friends is there. I forgot Ron was there with a group called Talking Dolls. So they had been teaching silk screening the week before me, and they had 2 more days left. So then Admire, who is from there, picking me up, we ride, and I will never complain about Detroit roads ever again, ever, because Zimbabwe won that day. I mean, it wasn't just like, we got potholes, and the roads are paved. And so once you get out of the city, there's no more paved roads, and it's like, it's not a pothole, it's like a whole man car hole. So if you don't know the terrain, and I was riding in the back seat, and it's a bar that's on the side. I call it an old shit bar, because it was like a lot of that. I was like doing this, and I was like, and it was 20 plus hours after traveling. I thought I was tired, but I couldn't, because it was like I was trying to see. We were driving. It was like a lot of dust. We were hitting all the holes. And I was like, and you know this road. So you're going soft for me. And it's not soft. And so I couldn't sleep when I got to the location. It was 1 a.m. And all I could hear was pigs, roosters, dogs, animals. And it was a cacophony of nature. And I was like, is this too much noise for me? Mind you, I live in the medical center with all the museums and all the sirens and all the racing that happens on 75 that people do with their bikes. And I'm like, and it's like, yeah. And I mean, it's so much noise that for me, it's white noise at this point, because I've lived there for a long time, but I'm out in nature, and I hear the pigs and the roosters and the dogs, and I'm agitated. So I put my earplugs in, and then I put my silence things on top of that, because I'm sleeping in what would be on a platform. They built this, it's like a hut, but it's not a hut. It's a place for you to sleep. So it's a bedroom made out of cement, drywall, and then a thatch roof that is the grass at the top. Okay, that's maybe, as not an architect, that sounds maybe right. I slept in it. It was safe. There were 3 of them, so Ron and the other folks from Talking Dolls were in the other one, and I was in one. And the bathroom was made out of cement and old pop bottles, and then it was like a snail, so it was open here, but you had to use buckets from the well to flush the toilet. So, and that wasn't in my sleeping space. So, like I said, I had no expectations, and then they built the art center that we would have the class in, and that's where the family slept upstairs in the loft. And so it was really beautiful, and the next day, Aunt Meyer's mother, who was in her 80s, came to wash clothes. And she had her great-grand on her back. And I just looked at her, and I was like, like, you're carrying your great-grand and you're washing clothes for the family of 4 here, the 3-year-old, the 4-year-old, the husband and the wife, and the guest. And you wanted to know if I was like, no, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna stand next to you and wash clothes. And she had a washboard, like an old school, and we were a distance from the city. So I was like, either she walked here or someone picked her up. And at that moment, I thought about the things that I saw women carry. She came in the door with buckets for washing the clothes. They were empty, but she had the baby on her back. And then she would go from the whale that was being attacked by termites to another space to wash the clothes, and then she hung everything up on the line. But she would come there, and it was like every 3 or 4 days, and wash the clothes. And then they had somebody else who was an artist who would cook, and somebody else who was an artist who would keep the grounds. And so we would go out to the market, and I would see women setting up just spaces to braid hair. And then women and other people would sell everything. Like, you could get everything, and they only used American dollars. They said they hadn't seen Zimbabwean money in a long time because they don't know where it is. I'm like, okay. So I would go in the market every day and get something, whatever wasn't in the garden, to eat. Avocados this big, for $1. Yes, every day. Oranges, bananas, because everybody had a banana tree or an avocado tree. You could get stuff right out of the garden. But thinking about how I saw women carry things there was interesting. And when I got back, we have a local bookstore called Source Bookstore, and Miss Janet asked me when I came in the door. Her and her daughter Allison ran up to me, and they were so excited because I posted videos. And if you follow me on Instagram, you can go down to May. That's when I was in Zimbabwe. Those videos are still there. But she says, what did you bring back besides trinkets? And that was the first time anybody had ever asked me a question like that. So I gasped. I held my breath for a moment, and I was like, wow, that's a heavy question. And I thought about it, and I said, the respect for water, because they didn't have a well, and we had to borrow water from other people's wells, and I couldn't drink the water. I got sick because I made a mistake of drinking water that was in the same water bottle like my water bottle, and it caused a situation. But I was smart enough to go to Whole Foods and buy activated charcoal and carry it with me. I got my bag 2 days later, by the way. But I had activated charcoal, and that helped settle some things. But we also had to have water to cook. They had to buy water to cook, clean, and for me to take a hot shower to heat up. So after a while, I stopped letting them buy water for me to wash my ass, because I was like, we're going to feed the family and the people here with the water. We're not going to buy water for me to heat up and wash my butt. I will be fine, because we're not doing that. We're going to buy wood, not to heat up water for me to wash my ass. I'm cool. I can wash in the cold shower. I don't have to scoop the hot water. You're not doing that. We're going to feed everybody. And then after a while, I started cooking some of the food too. But when I got back, I answered, I said, one thing that I brought back is the respect for water, the respect for fresh water, the respect for the privilege that we have here. I have indoor plumbing. I came back on June 5th, which is my mother's birthday. And I hit New York the morning of June 6th. And then I sat in the New York airport waiting to come to Detroit, and Central Station had their opening where, you know, Patti LaBelle and everybody was there. It's the main train station there. And people were like, are you coming? You got the VIP tickets. You can come backstage. I was like, let me tell you something. I haven't soaked my body in almost a month, and I have a clawfoot tub, and I have hot water at my house. Let me take a bath and see how I feel. And you know what that means. Once you get home and take off binding things and you sit in your tub, you ain't going nowhere. I was done. I was just sitting in the tub and just was like, so I told Miss Janet, we have some of the freshest water right now on the planet in Michigan. I was like, you can't drink the water in Zimbabwe. You can't even get it out of the well. You have to pay for it. And also the respect for women and how they carry things, emotionally, physically, psychologically, and spiritually. And then I started thinking, we're privileged. How do we carry? Like, how do we carry? Like, I have a car. Women in the market were carrying wood. They were carrying food, babies, water, everything. And people, I'm not just saying women, everybody was carrying. It was rare to see folks with cars and big vehicles. Like, everybody was carrying something, even the children. You know, from school, their backpacks were leaning off and they were running with the uniforms, but they had food in the hand, something on the head, the backpack over here. Everybody was carrying, and I started thinking about what a privilege it is to live in this country, and how do we carry? What do we hold? How do we hold? So I started thinking about the women that I know who carry heavily, emotionally, physically, psychologically, and spiritually. So the very first portrait I did was Alex. This one right here. This is my sister-in-law. She's married to my oldest brother, and she's had Nasir now, who is in her belly. Nasir is 3 or 4 weeks old now. No, is he 4 weeks old? This is Natalia. She's about 5'10". My brother's about 6'2". This baby just turned 3 today. She my height, I feel like it. She just like long. And then, so Alex works at Trinity Hospital in Pontiac, and her grandmother worked at Trinity, and her mother works at Trinity. So she's sort of like a legacy at this hospital. Her grandmother, she was taking care of in hospice care in her home. Her grandfather, while she was taking care of her grandmother, decided he was going to check out first, and no one knew he was sick. So he died, and 6 months later, her grandmother died. So my sister-in-law and my brother inherited the house. And so the house is right behind their place, which is right in front of her mother's place. So again, Pontiac is a community like Detroit was in the 70s. Families live very close together. And so when I told her I was going to draw her, I embedded her grandparents from a photo of them in the 70s inside her maternity dress, which is like a horoscope dress. So it's about them in the stars. I found this carpet in a very old painting that I thought was really beautiful because it was like dead sunflowers. And then the rose wallpaper back here, the peace lily plant that was given to her after her grandfather died, and then the pothos plant that belonged to her grandmother. And her grandmother, she used to call her grandmother Boo. Her favorite color was purple. So this is about life and death. The cycle of it, you know, you can't have life without death. We're all gonna go. You don't have to help it though. And so I wanted to talk about Alex and her sweetness, her kindness, and how she carries my brother's seed, and also her grandparents' legacy. And so this is about what she carries, and this is called The Moment. So Nasir was just born, and I'm super excited. The baby was born at the end of February. Natty is March. today, and then my brother's birthday is at the end of March. I'm like, y'all gonna have a lot of gifts around February and March. This is Lakila, here with the collard greens in her hands. Lakila Brown is an amazing artist out of, she was born in Detroit, and she had, at the same time that the DIA holds Tiff Massey's show, Lakila had a show at MOCAD, Museum of Contemporary Art, and it was all sculptural work, and she did cast of collard greens, corn, okra, her grandmother's hands, pig feet, the way that Southerners would eat. So she did cast of all of them, and it was installed throughout the gallery, and then she had a banana skirt in honor of Josephine Baker, pearls coming out of the wall. So it was like really, really beautiful white plaster. And then I can't even remember some of the other materials, but I don't like okra. I am one of those people that are like, nope, I can't do it. I can't. It's because my great-grandmother ate it, and it's slimy. I can't do it. My mouth won't open. But because Lakila cast a lot of okra, pig feet, corn, collard greens, it was really beautiful to see it. And then I said, I wanted to have a lot of contour, which is a line drawing in the back. I really enjoyed doing the bamboo earrings. That's one of her key signatures, and also her cornrows, thinking about the seeds and planting and gardens and all of that mimicking itself in her hair. But also, I never ever have seen, and I'm sure my grandmother, my great-grandmother grew okra, but the actual blossom of the plant is like a morning glory. It's absolutely beautiful. And so it's this white flower that is simply gorgeous, and I was like, well, I would just grow it to see that. But okra comes from Africa, and they used to use it as a thickening agent, not to really eat the vegetable, but to put it in a pot. So in jambalaya or different New Orleans dishes, they use it in the soup to make it thick. And so my grandmother would put it on the top of string beans, and I'd be like, why are you ruining them string beans like that? I mean, like, just move that over. The string beans was fine. And so I did enjoy drawing this and the collard greens, and she has her grandmother's hands. And so I was just thinking about what Lakila carries in terms of the legacy. Both her parents are deceased. She's lost a brother, she's lost a niece. So I have adopted her into my family as one of my children. When she started CCS, all of her family was alive. By the time she was in her junior year, not everybody made it. And she lived on campus, but she was a child from Detroit. She went to Cody High School, and she moved on campus just so she could think. And so she became my child in that. And right now, her and Mario are gonna have a show downtown at Library Collective. And so I love her work. So if you wanna look up a really great artist, her name is Lakila Brown. She lives in New York, lives in Brooklyn, but she's an amazing artist. So I really enjoyed doing this piece because I've never drawn collard greens before, but I sure can cook them and eat them. And so this piece over here is Dr. Angela Wellman. She's a doctor of music. She lives between Detroit and Oakland, California, and she opened up a school of music for children in Oakland who don't have music. And so the name of that piece is Song of Solomon. And when you read Song of Solomon 2:1, it states, I am the rose of Sharon. And so I gave a nod to my great-grandmother because we had rose of Sharon growing all around the house, which is like the body of Christ, if you will. But I'm thinking about music and those who practice, because it's like poetry. It is medicine, and those instruments she has, she's actually making a banjo, which is one of the oldest instruments, and it comes from Africa. So Angela sings, she plays those instruments, and she is also making them. So I love the title of this, and if you look behind her, these are the Rose of Sharon, which is in the hibiscus family. And so I like putting little nuggets of things that are about my grandmother and the things that they carried with them. Because wherever we were, there were always these bushes of Rose of Sharon. And I love them. And I think about my great-grandmother whenever I put them. But I didn't like the negative space. So it was really important to be very subtle, but also to draw them in here. And after talking to Angela, I found out that was her favorite flower. And it wasn't something that I interviewed her. I just added it in there. And she's like, what is that? And I'm like, it's the Rose of Sharon. And so she was like, do you know? I was like, absolutely not. So things happen in a divine way that it should. This piece in the back, I definitely want to talk about Njia Kai. She is a producer, a filmmaker. She went to Howard University for filmmaking. She's a producer in Detroit of all of the festivals. If you've ever been to Detroit for the African World or any of the festivals that were held at the riverfront, Njia was responsible for making sure they went well. And that's from the Polish festival to all of them. The hold down, all of it, that was Njia. And so not too long ago, maybe 4-5 years ago, her daughter, who was my daughter's age, died of cancer. And she was 38 when she died. And Njia, did something that I hadn't seen since down south. She was taking care of her daughter in the house for hospice care. And her daughter, Indidika, didn't want people to know she was sick because she just didn't want to share it with everybody. Now, we knew because we were Njia's sort of like bonus daughters and sisters, and we knew. And so Njia was taking care of her in the house, and she had 2 children that were probably 5 or 6 and 3. And so this is Indidika here. And this is Njia's mother. Now, when I was drawing Njia, things happened to me spiritually that I can't explain, but I know what the explanation is. I was drawing Njia, and I was trying to figure out what to put under here. This is the magnolia tree. That's my great-grandmother's name. So these are the magnolia blossoms, because when you look up what magnolia does or what it stands for, it's a healer. It's a person that brings people together, and that's who Njia is. And she's also holding water, which is the highway for spirits and the physical world, right? It's where they meet. And so she's holding a camera, and these are on her bookshelf in her house. And I was trying to figure out what to put in these cases because I couldn't see from the photograph that I took what the images were. But I wanted to represent her because I feel like she carries very heavy emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, and physically. And so I was getting ready for the auto show. And there's a preview party. Everybody pays about $400. Well, I was invited with the poet laureate to come, and we were just gonna dress up. So listen, it's in Our magazine, which I still haven't gotten, but like if this is dressed down, imagine me dressed up, right? Still top hat, the whole 9 yards. I'm looking for this blonde wig, and I'm talking like Marilyn Monroe blonde, bleach blonde wig. I found it. But I have this cabinet in my sitting space in my bedroom. And I'm like, where's the wig? Where's the wig? And I'm opening the cabinet and I'm pulling things out because Jessica is calling us a lift because we don't want to drive because of the snow, and we got on cute everything. So we don't want to have to worry about parking. So I open the cabinet and I'm digging things out, and then this obituary falls out. The obituary, you can come in if you want. Okay, it was crumpled. It's like a 6-page average size, like 8x11 piece of paper. Most obituaries are small, like they're folded. You can tell it's been paper, it's been folded, stapled, if it's more than just this. This was like a 4 or 5-page obituary that was crumbled up in my wig closet. It was Indidika. It fell out on the floor, and I was like, girl, I can't talk to you right now. I got to get ready to go to this auto party. I know you want to be in a picture with your mama, but don't do this to me right now. I can't. And I stopped, and I breathed a little bit, and I was like, I had some tears in my eyes because Ngia is so old school and so African in a way. When I walked in her house when she had the memorial service for her daughter, something told me when I was walking down the street, be prepared because she's going to have the body in the living room. And when I walked in the house, she was clean and like they had dressed her. She was in the living room. And I didn't know why I knew that, but I knew it. And there were drummers in the back and we were eating and there was dancing and we had a celebration of her life. And so when that obituary fell out of the cabinet, I was like, I can't talk to you right now. I got to get ready. Jessica gonna be here. I need this wig and I got my makeup. I'm going to the thing. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So I picked up the obituary, put it on the little round table, and then I just held my breath and I was like, I can't believe you just tried to talk to me right now. I can't talk about that right now. And so the next day I called Ngia and I said, can I tell you something? And I just need space for me. I said, I think I know what I'm gonna put in the cabinets and I just want to let you know and ask if that's okay. And she was like, what happened? And I said, the booklet, I didn't even know it was in, and why was it in the wig closet? And she says, well, Indita had been going through chemo and she had grown up with her hair natural and she had never played with wigs. And so she loved wigs all of a sudden. I was like, well, why was she in my wig closet? And so she was like, well, maybe that was something, but she was telling you she wanted to be in the moment with you, to commune with you in that moment. And I was like, girl, people be talking and I'll be like, I ain't got time right now and you gonna do this right here. I'm glad it wasn't late at night because I done had a moment. And so I ended up picking a picture of Indita when she was 14, sitting with her grandmother in a very intimate way with a cowrie shell necklace that belonged to her mother that I didn't know. And it was just a picture. As soon as I opened the obituary the next day and looked, and I was like, I think this is a good one, because she was 14. And that's a moment of transition between young lady and almost turning into a woman. And she's sitting with her grandmother, and now they're together watching her daughter, her mother, right? And so these are all her ancestors too, and her husband is a sculptor. So this cowrie shell talked to this cowrie shell, and these two beings talked to this being. And so she carries them, and I carry them too. And so that was really beautiful. And this is the last one I'm going to talk about, and then offer you guys an opportunity to use your voices. This is my niece. She is my sister's oldest daughter. And so Monet carries heavy emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, and physically. She has her own two children, but she was raised by her grandparents. And so I asked her for pictures of them, and she didn't know I was going to include them on her altar, but they're both deceased. And so she carries the picture book, she carries water, the Bible, and then she honors them by going to her altar every day to ask for permission to move with their protection. And so I wanted to talk about how we carry our ancestors spiritually, when we name them, when we know who they are and what their journeys were in order for us to be here. It's a good way to say, I walk in gratitude and grace because of you. And so when I think about women who carry the seeds, who decide to have children, or who decide to plant gardens as their children, or their art, or the way they walk in their community, or what they do as a profession of creativity, they're planting seeds for the community that they live in. So I feel like all of these women carry things differently. This is Sydney James. She's got one of the largest murals in the city of Detroit, or maybe 4, 5, 7. But she's the only woman I know who's ever had a mural festival called Blackout Walls. That's a woman-run festival that, you know, people used to call graffiti, but it's murals. And she's painted on every continent except for Antarctica. And I say, why haven't you painted up there? And she's like, girl, it's cold up there. I was like, they got heat. Paint on the inside. But you can say you've touched every single one. She's painted a mural in Australia, in Asia, in Africa, in Europe. She's Detroit born, went to CCS. I think she was born in 78. Her name is Sydney G. James. She's one of the baddest artists I know, and her and Lakila were at CCS together. And so I feel like all the women who carry in this room carry things differently, spiritually, psychologically, physically, and emotionally. And when I think about what I carry, my first answer is, what do you hold, Sabrina? When I am slightly stressed or overwhelmed, I hold my breath. I also feel like I have to tell myself, calm down, breathe. I also feel like I hold burdens and secrets for my family. I also feel like I carry joy. I also carry light. And I carry the dream of my father, who was never able to be a professional artist. So I think about those things. Those are the things that I carry emotionally and psychologically. Physically, I carry myself. I carry, the babies until I can't hold them anymore. I feel like I carry the food, and the responsibility to give myself permission to be my own healer. And so I'm always asking people, what do you carry? And so when I ask them, I say, don't answer me. I just need you to hold it in your head and think about it. Because the answer can be physical, emotional, spiritual, psychologically, and it can be all at once. But what do you carry? How do you hold? Or what do you hold? And I want you to leave here today thinking about that, or the people around you, and thinking about what they carry, what they brought with them. The installation on the floor here really kind of mimics the things that I saw my grandmothers, my aunts carry from down south. Like they had these cedar chests, these bags, these things. And some people call us hoarders, because I got a house full of stuff and a garage full of stuff. But what happens is you have these babies and they leave it. When they leave, they leave it. They leave their cats and their dogs and their paintings and all their stuff. And then you be there with your stuff, they stuff, and then your siblings be like, oh, you got a garage? Can I put that? Go ahead. And then you be like with these people, and then you break up with them, and then they leave stuff, and you be like, I shouldn't throw that away, because, that wouldn't be nice. So then you end up with all this stuff, right? And so I was thinking about mothers who still have, the babies be 50 years old, you still got that shoe. You know what I'm saying? So thinking about doilies and gloves and soft things that we carry with us throughout the life. Old tablecloths, things that were our grandmothers, our aunts, our siblings, remembering things, or sacred objects, if you will. So think about the question, what do you carry? How do you hold? When you leave here, it's nice. It's a nice conversation starter too. Like, what do you carry? So I'm going to stop talking and offer you an opportunity to ask questions. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody?
You said something about a chaperone?
Yes.
What is that?
It's like a standalone closet. And it's usually made out of cedar, and it was like rounded on the edges, but I know a lot of families from the South would have them. But it's a standalone wooden closet, because old houses didn't really have closets. And so they would bring these chifforodes, or these cedar chests, to put fur coats in, and things that were like really beautiful garments that were special would go inside these. You can find them at a lot of antique stores now, unless you have an elder in your family and they kept the furniture, but it's like an old standalone closet. And it was made typically out of like walnut, but the inside might have been also, I just remember it smelling like cedar. Yeah, because I played in it. And I don't know if you guys remember the movie Narnia, where they go in the closet.
Yeah.
They go inside one of those. And then on the back end is all the magic. But if you watch they go inside one of those closets. And I used to play inside it, so I could, if I wrote movies, I probably would have wrote a Narnia. Because that was like my world. I would always be in the chifforobe or in the cedar chest or in the bottom of my grandmother's closet in her sea of shoes. It was like an imaginary world. To be in their closets, to smell them, and the mothballs and the cedar, but the dresses that were embellished, because my grandmother made things, so she had so many clothes. And so I was always, I'm a very tactile person, so it's hard to just stop at 2D. I have to feel things. I used to go in museums and be like, ooh, don't go to jail, don't do it, don't do it. Ooh. So it'd be like, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. So I love fabric and things, so whenever I do drawings and paintings, there's sometimes a sewing component. I'll leave thread or I'll sew some fabric on it because I love stitch. I love piercing the paper. I love sewing, but that was my first introduction to art, was sewing. And I didn't know the term artist. I always knew maker. So they made everything from the curtains to the clothes to the tablecloths to everything in the house. So I come from a family full of makers. And so when I, found out that there's a term called artist, I was like, oh, okay. That's what we are. So, yeah. You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? No?
Do you notice you're in tune with smells a lot when you talk. When you smell roses somewhere, does that bring up a lot of
Absolutely. I'm in tune with all of my senses. So I like to feel. I like to smell, and I can't walk past a rose without smelling it. So I'm one of those people that will just do that, and if it doesn't smell, I'm like, somebody to mess with this. Like, this ain't right. It should smell. And so that should alarm us. You know what I'm saying? So Bree said something on the way here. She was like, I can't wait to touch grass. That's a beautiful statement, to be grounded in grass and let your feet and your toes touch the grass. It's some energy that you get. What is it called, Sydney? Cymatics? When you let the vibration of you let the earth fill you with energy. And so I'm one of those people that I like to smell, I like to hear, I like to be aware of what my senses intake. And Saul Williams said, be careful what you digest, what you're listening to, what you're watching, what you smell, what you eat, what you hear, because it's important that, that it all feeds you in some way, that it gives you some kind of medicine. So when I smell rose, when I see a magnolia tree, I think of my great-grandmother automatically. My mother wore Windsong. It's an old perfume, and I remember the commercial. My grandmother used Afro Sheen oil and the spray, so I remember what that smelled like. So there's certain smells, like an old car had a weird, leathery, dark smell that you could almost taste. A car from the 70s that you could roll the windows down and drive across the Belle Isle Bridge with the windows down, and you could just smell everything. So I'm that person. Like, I want all my senses to be triggered sometimes all at once. It can be overwhelming. But when I go in museums, I'm feeding my eyes often. And when I my studio's down the street from Motown, and I'm doing a commission for them right now. So I'm on the street with 3 music museums, my studio is. So the Techno Museum, and then there's a house techno music school, and then you have Motown Museum. So I'm in them often, and I love music. I don't do any of this without sound. And I usually have my speaker on, and my house is like on 10. So I, often lose myself in the drawings, in the paintings, in the making, but it's not without sound. And then when I live as art completely. So if I'm not making, I'm plating. Like I want the plate to be beautiful before I eat it. So I'm almost creating art with the food, with the way I dress, with the way I sleep, with the way my house is one big ass installation.
A question then, paint, and you select a subject.
Mm-hmm.
Do you put certain kind of music on when you do certain?
Sometimes I kept playing this one artist from South Africa, and it was called Ancestors when I was doing Ngia's piece, and my niece. And she's a very young woman. She lives in South Africa, and she's got a song out that's brand new called Ancestors. And when I heard it, it just it made my chesticles open, and it was like hearts and tears, because I was thinking of what it is to lose a child, to have to bury a child and then help mother her children with their father. As grandmothers often do. They have to step in and become a mother again because their child cannot mother the children. So I was just thinking about what it is to have that, and also to be my niece who loved her grandparents dearly, and they both died, and her and Alex both experienced the same thing. Alex was raised by her mother and her father, but her grandparents spent so much time with her. And so just thinking of them and their path, and knowing that none of us are going to live long, but understanding that death is a cycle of life, and what it is to value that when you have it. So the cowrie shells are about value. The cowrie shells represent money in Africa. And so the big shells or the little shells, it's all money. It's all value. And, I was at a talk just this weekend at the Schomburg Center for Black Life and Culture, and we were talking about James Baldwin, and somebody asked a question to one of the curators, who's a good friend of mine, and she says, everything is about your point of view, because we were talking about how the planets were aligned with each other on this past Saturday. Like you could go out the door and just look up in the sky, and you could see all the planets, or at least some of them closest to the moon, right? And then I was like, wow. And then when we had that show in San Francisco, it was a full moon, and she said to me, it's always a full moon. It's your point of perspective and your point of view. The moon is always full. We only see what we can see, but the moon is always full. So thinking about, we're always carrying something. So for somebody to ask you what you carry is like, well, when? Because, if you live this life, you're always carrying something. It can be angst, it can be joy, it can be light, it can be your loved ones, it can be your parents, it can be whatever. We're always carrying something at your point of view, because the moon is always full. And so just thinking about that and how we value things, that's why I put the cowrie shells in there, because...
Are these cowrie shells?
Mm-hmm, yep, they're all cowrie shells. They're from the ocean.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they're an actual
How
shell.
do you spell that?
C-O-W-R-I-E, cowrie shell, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they're from the ocean, and I was just thinking about, how we value things, because all of these things were purchased at a resale shop. And so somebody gave up those shoes or those little things because they didn't need them anymore. But I valued them, the doilies and the baby shoes and the gloves, and just thinking about even the suitcases that Alex found in the basement of the house they inherited. Her and my brother were like, get all this stuff out of here. We just thought, I'm like, but do you see these suitcases? I mean, they sweet suitcases. I mean, like, they were really, really nicely kept suitcases. Right? And so I was just kind of like, it's your point of view, your point of perspective. What do you carry? You know, in the song Erykah Badu sang Bag Lady, you know, you gonna hurt yourself carrying all them bags around. And so just thinking about how we free ourselves. And so I had a conversation with somebody like, some people can never put things down because they can't. And so I was thinking about that. I was like, well, no, everybody has a choice. And he was like, no, some people don't have a choice. And I was like, I don't know about that. Because as you get older, you start putting shit down. You know what I'm saying? You start cleaning it out because you don't need it. It can't go nowhere with you. Right. So it's like you need to figure it out. Like if you keep carrying it, Toni Morrison says if you want to fly, you got to put down the shit that weighs you down. And if it's stuff that's heavy, put it down. As we get older, this is my 58th year. As I get older, it's like stuff that I don't need. And this one, the 24-year-old, Mom, throw that away. Mom, you don't need this. Mom, throw that. I'd be like, I ain't even see that. That's probably been in the refrigerator 5 years. I ain't seen it. Sudney be like, throw it away. I'll be like, okay, all right. So, you know, learning how to let go of things. And I'm still learning because I'm still a collector. But as my studio fills up with things that I no longer need, I feel it is important to donate these things to a women's care facility who have babies, because newborn things only last a good 3 weeks. But if you need them and you don't have them, it just makes sense for somebody to use them. And so my hope is that those things will be donated to a shelter after the show, and then somebody else can carry them. And so thank you, everybody. It's so good to